There's a little bit darker shadow in the center of my peach there. And so I'm taking a magenta from my Rembrandt set and just putting a little bit in there. And then I see that this is a little bit darker in here. So I'm going to take an orange. This is a straight up orange from the Rembrandt set. And I'm going to see if I can darken that just with my orange. But I see it's got a little bit of neutrality to it. It's a little bit neutral. One way I can knock that down is just by touching in something that will neutralize it, which can be a magenta again, just touching it in there a little bit. I'm watching for other people to join here. So just needed a little bit more something there. The other thing I would like to do is just brighten it up a little bit. When I look at the two of them, I could certainly darken this, which will in turn cause this part of my peach to brighten up, but it still is looking, I mean, I could add my deep purple to that, but I still would like to brighten that up a little bit. So I'm going to take a warm yellow. I'm going to take my 257 and going to hatch a little bit of this up in here. I just want, since I consider this peach to be my center of interest, I want to brighten that a little bit. And I see just a little bit of the same color over here. Now this right now, it feels a little bit more colorful than my reference picture. That's okay. I'd rather have an exaggerated color because we're using pastel, and we get to do that with pastel. We can exaggerate things because that's just artistic license. Now, when I squint and I look at that peach, I see the lightest light it's almost like a highlight right in here. So I'm going to want to bring that highlight up a little bit, and I see it because it's warm light coming through the window, so it's going to influence that. So I'm just taking a straight white. This is a white. In the new pastel, it's 249. You can use any white, I suppose. And I'm just going to hatch in a little bit, and my thought there is that it will mix a little bit with that yellow and orange to lighten that up just a little bit. And I know I'm spending a lot of extra time here on this peach because it's my center of interest peach. The other thing I see in here, and maybe you see that too, is I see some deep reds. I see some reds, like if you're taking my color theory, which you two are, you see like cad red. I'm going to put a little bit of it. I see it right down in here, this intense red. And the reason we see the intensity in there is because, or we could call it the body color, what it actually is, it's the area that's being least affected by the blowout of light and less affected also by the shadow. So wherever you see a little bit of these red areas, I'm in here a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So exaggerating it just a little bit. Need to make sure my microphone, I'm getting a new microphone because I noticed in the videos the microphone kind of, I think it's because I turn away from the computer microphone. Anyway, got to make sure you can hear what I'm saying. And then I'm just going to kind of feather it out. If you have a bright red, which I do think in your, and this might have broken off, in your new pastel set, you could kind of hatch or feather that over into what would be our terminator area. And let that deep red mingle a little bit with our shadow, which is kind of purpley. And I'm going to add a little bit more purple into that shadow. If you remember right from our color theory class yesterday, we talked about that, how purple is what you will find in the shadows of anything that's yellow, typically. So there we are, already using. Now I've got this pretty nifty 346 that I've used through the whole painting. I've used 346 and I've also used 353. Let's see if I can hold it up there a little bit better. Looks black on. And this 353 is a colorful brown. It's a brown that has a little bit of purple in it, and it's worked well out in I used it for wood grain, mostly the wood grain. But anyway, I want to punch up some of the sparkle in my shadow here. So I'm going to take this violet, this 346, and I'm going to hatch into those reds a little bit and let that purple kind of mingle out there with the red that I just put down. So I'm feathering it into those reds. So it's just making it a more colorful shadow. This shadow down here on the bottom on this rim, and I know we've already worked in this shadow a little bit, but I want to put a little bit more purple, and I see some purple right down here along the edge. It's kind of bouncing up, and it probably has to do with the wood grain. The color of the wood is bouncing back up into the color of the peach. But I wanted my peach to be a little bit more colorful, even than the photograph. But I can see I need a darker edge there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this purpley brown, this 353, which I've used it in the wood grain. So it's going to kind of marry that. Let's see if I can get dark enough here along this edge. I'm using the sharp edge, if I have a sharp edge left, here on my new pastel. See kind of a dark edge up here too. That helped that. I think I need to make my little stem spot a little bit bigger. It's looking too small, so I'm taking this same purpley brown. I'm going to make my stem just a little bit bigger. Just didn't look like it was quite the right size. Now I'm going to come back in to the top because this just looks like a dark swatch there. And I can actually see some like ochre oranges. And I've got this nice, well, it's a 017. I'm debating whether or not to use 017 or my 233 up here to kind of marry this dark. Because I put some red in here and orange. It might be just a little bit too much. And this is too light, so I'm going to go back to try out this color. This might be too light also. Might have to get into some other colors. Just want to marry that dark patch there with some oranges. Now I'm just going to come down here in the shadow. Before we move on to our last peach, I want to sparkle this up a little bit. I want to sparkle the reflection up. So like we added some sparkle there to that shadow with our purple, 3, 4, 6 again. And I'm just doing horizontal strokes into this shadow with this violet. I mingle with some of these other colors. So it just makes for a little bit more color there in that shadow. It's a little bit light though. Come down into the reflection a little bit there. Okay, that sure brightened that up, which it needed it. I do see though, just spending just a little bit more time, there is kind of a, I want to say kind of a rim light. It technically isn't rim light, but I see a light violet up here along that rim. And I have this patch of this intense yellow right here too. It just needs to be softened a little bit. So I'm going to do double duty with a kind of a light pinky peach. Let's see what I have. So with my other peach, I see more violet in there though, like a light violet. Let's see what we have. A light green. So this is what I have. Just my other new pastels. Right, here we go. So this is in our Rembrandt set. It's a very light violet. And I'm just going to touch it on there just to test it, see if it's going to work to kind of feather that yellow in a little bit. I'm just touching a little bit of it on there. Ah, I see it's just a hint right in these areas. Touch it in here. Now, I kind of want to settle that down. It's just a little bit too bright. I'm going to take my pink, my 038, and I'm just going to hatch into that a little bit, barely touching the board, just lightly hatching there. That settles that light violet down a little bit. It's adding a little bit of peachy pink. And I can see that's working actually. So I also see there's a little bit of this peachy pink while I have it in my hand. I'm going to introduce some of it down into this area here. There's light that's bouncing off of probably the glass, and it's reflecting back up into the peach right over here. This is still jumping out a little bit. Take that peachy pink, hatching over it, weaving some pink into that light violet. If it feels like it's jumping out a little bit on your painting, just take that pink or a light peachy pink. Okay, so we've introduced some nice vibrant violets in here. So now that I've done that, what happens a lot of times is when I do some work over here, I see I can come over here and do a little bit of work. I'm going to take that same violet, a little bit more in this peach. This peach is informing me that we need a little bit more of this 346 over in this peach. Up, I'm lifting off, I'm picking up a little bit of that orange in there and bringing it back into my shadow. So I want to be mindful of that. Just a little bit, doesn't need too much. I can also see that I could add a little bit of red, my cadmium red, into some of this body. It's kind of the body color of kind of like the Terminator, or it's more like the dark light in our anatomy of light. Really brightens up that color area there. I'm really tempted though to do the same thing down here, but that wouldn't make sense. That's not going to read right, and it isn't reading right now because I have some of the same colors here because our form is turning. So I need to take a darker something, and magenta is going to work just fine, and I'm going to hatch into that shadow area because I need to turn that form or it's going to look flat. You need to darken this with a darker, and it's a cooler red. My cool red, this would be like our magenta in our color theory course. So that, I don't know if you could see that, but it turned our form from a flat peach because this is a little darker, a little cooler, so it turned our form, making it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Now that I've done that, I can see that there is some peaches right up in here. Where'd it go? There. I'm going to take my Pinky Peach 038 and just going to hatch a little bit of pink, except I'm picking up my red, so I have to clean off my pencil a lot. A lot of it right here. I've been tempted to put some violets in there, that light violet that we used over here. Tempted, but I'm not going to do it just yet. A little bit of work and then let it rest. A little bit more darker shadow, hatch a little bit more of my magenta in here. Okay, I want to get to our last peach because this is our last day in broken color on this. So let's move over to our last peach. Okay, and just I'm sitting back and kind of squinting and just looking at my darks that I've put in there. And I'm thinking we could do a little bit more shadow in there, but I'm going to use my sparkly purple, this 346, and put just a little bit more shadow back here, especially, and that's pretty sparkly there. I'm probably going to need to, just going to add, this is kind of part of my underpainting. I think we're going to have to drop to our purpley brown, which is our 353. I'm going to put a little bit of that in there too, partly to just get the values down a little bit before I start laying in the color over it. This is kind of like, yesterday in watercolor, since we're both in watercolor, I'll take this opportunity to talk about layering, how we did a layer of violet underneath and we dried it, and then we put our yellow over it, how it made it more three-dimensional. This is similar. This is a similar thing. What we're doing is putting this color underneath. I'm just going to smooth that out because this is kind of our underpainting. We can do that. So this is similar, really, to what we were doing yesterday in color theory, is putting down that purple underneath the yellow to create that beautiful three-dimensional shadow. There we go. Okay, so now we are ready to start hatching in. Before I get too far along though, because I don't want to miss this, is this glowiness underneath this peach that's coming through. So I see that it's kind of an orange. But I'm going to start with 040. Just put a little bit of that in there. This is my Conte pastel pencil. Just kind of feather it out into there. But what we're going to have to do for that glow to really show up, we're going to have to pull out a little bit of black and put it on this peach, right along this edge here, for that glow to really stand out. Got my black Conte pastel pencil. Not putting very much on there, and if it looks too black, I can always feather a little bit of violet over it, but I want this glow to happen. This is powerful because it's right next to our center of interest, and it's such an interesting effect. I will take a little bit of my orange Conte pastel pencil, 028, and I see it especially right down here where it's kind of meeting the accent shadow of the shape, my center of interest peach. So there's that beautiful glow. I want to make sure we got that in there today, so you can kind of see what that did. That little glowy spot, how powerful that is. Okay, let's move into our last peach. So our last peach, it's kind of back in the shadows there. So I want to start in my darks here, and I'm going to start with I've got this magenta, the Rembrandt magenta. Just kind of hatching that in there. I see a little bit of magenta up here. Not much because it's in the light. Just a little bit of magenta up in there. Let's see, a little bit of magenta down in here, not much. It's pretty neon, doesn't it? Okay, now I'm going to pick up my red, my cadmium red. And again, it's in that area that's least affected by light and shadow. It's pretty bright right now, and that's okay. We'll settle that down a little bit. That's where I see most of that warm red in there. In my orange, then I see an orange. It's the same. So my Rembrandt set has two different oranges. Kind of a deeper orange. I'm going to use my deeper orange first because it's moving out of the shadows. Looks pretty psychedelic, but it always does starting out. Now there's a little bit of this yellowy orange back in here, and I'm tempted to use orange, but if we look closer, it's more of an ochre. So I'm going to grab this ochre, this 233 in my new pastel, and I'll put some of that in there. It's looking a little bright. So I need to mix in some sienna, settle that down a little bit. I need to reshape my pear. It got kind of square. Pear, my peach. Really looking psychedelic. Now I'm going to pick up a sienna. The sienna is 203. There we go. That's, so I know there's some yellow in there, but I also know there's some sienna. And if I took that little gray square that I use, I'll bet you we would see a lot of sienna in there. I'm going to bring that sienna down into the shadow a little bit. I'm going to hatch up into my orange. And I also see it, the light's bouncing off the table up into my peach right there. A little bit, and that's a bit exaggerated. That's okay. I'll settle that down. Now we've got a lot of our darks in there, but I do see that I need to, going back to that sienna for a minute, I need to bring that down just a little bit more because I want to hatch in some of this dark brown, browny purple. I've got my deep brown purple, the 353. I'm going to begin to narrate those colors there in the shadow. Hatching and cross-hatching up into those colors. I'm not sure what I've got going right here. I've got something weird. Hatching right up into those vibrant colors so that they'll kind of meld together a little bit. Going to settle this reflected light down with this deep brown purple. I really like it because it's a colorful purple. It's not a dead purple. Give it my peach. I know I had a rim on there before. Put it back on. Barely touching it. Going to come up here with this dark brown purple here and kind of mingle it with this magenta that we put in earlier. I'm barely touching the paper, so a lot of what I'm doing is actually just mixing. I'm hatching, but I'm kind of mixing at the same time. With hard pastels, the new pastels and the pastel pencils, they do that. They deposit a little bit of color, but they also work as kind of a blending tool also. I'm going to switch to a dark brown now. This is 001 because I don't want to deposit as much brown. See if this works. Just hatching into it, just settling that color down with hatches. Now I really want to get the rest of my peach because it's distracting me a little bit. That blue spot there. I wish I had a better, I think I've looked before. This is a new Pastel 222. We've used it a little bit in other places on here, not very much. Just going to lay some of that color down. It's a little bit vibrant, that's okay. Kind of weave into this corner here of this peach where I use that magenta. So my weaves are overlapping into the other colors. My hatches are just weaving into the other colors a little bit. It's kind of a back and forth thing. Put the color down, weave into it, then come back. Put the previous color down. So you're just building those layers of color, letting the other color peek through. taking the corner and bumping right up to my other peach. So who would have guessed that this color back here is an ochre color and a sienna? You know, because we know symbolically that our peach is a yellow and orange. But all of that deep dark shadow back there has darkened it, neutralized that orange and yellow and turned it into an ochre or a sienna. Now what I like to do is I like to get my accent shadow. So I'm going to take my black and I'm going to put my accent shadow in there. That's going to really cause our glowy, this area here that's glowing, to glow even more, because black being the darkest neutral there is, and then you've got a little bit of chroma there, a little bit of intensity. I'm going to smooth this out just a little bit. Now black, I usually like to inject some color in there. So I'm going to take my dark purple brown, which is my 353 again, and I'm going to just go over a little bit, kind of form the edge of my peach shape. Let's see if I can get in here so you can see it a little bit better. Just doesn't come through very good. There we go, a little bit better. So I'm taking my deep purpley brown and getting that edge in, kind of mingling it with that black, because I know there is wood grain like my other reflections. I'm using a horizontal stroke to mimic wood grain, so it kind of translates, you know, and I'm going to actually, you can see the shadow coming out, so I'm going to take it right out into here. Mingling with that black so that there's not much black showing at all. It's mostly the brown over the black, but we needed the black to drop the value down to where it needed to be. Now I see this, kind of this, you know, when I, out of my periphery, I see some red in there. And that's the interesting thing, is you're going to start seeing this too. So our eyes are very interesting in that the way our rods and cones work, our rods see color. Hope I've got that right. See color. And our central vision has more cones that pick up light and dark. So you're going to find, I mean, there's a lot of rods and cones in our central vision, which is the macula. You know, you hear of macular degeneration. That's why you don't want to eat seed oils at all. Anyway, I've been reading a lot about it because my mother-in-law, she's just developing macular degeneration. So anyway, get off on a rabbit trail here. Anyway, so our rods and cones, the way our rods are in our periphery, our rods see color. And there's a real concentration of them, this is what I understand, hope I don't have this wrong, in our periphery. So sometimes in our periphery, we're going to see color, our eyes are going to pick up color better than when we look straight on. And when I was sitting here, I could see a little bit of magenta in my periphery, right in here. Another way you can do it is look at something black, stare at for a few minutes, and then glance at the color you're trying to see, and for an instant you're going to see like an underlying color. So I see just a little bit of magenta in there with our glowiness right in there. It's certainly not being picked up in Zoom. Down here. So anyway, this shadow here is extending. So we've got a shadow going on here, and then it kind of extends out because the light's moving out. Now, we need to turn that into a little bit more of a smoky shadow. So, and I did that a little bit with this shadow here. I'm taking my black Conte and I am doing some horizontals with this shadow right here and turning it a little bit darker and smokier. So yeah, I'm using black, but I've got that purple there so it doesn't turn into like a black hole, but it also makes it kind of smoky. That real neutral there, very smoky neutral, which what happens with this smoky neutral color is it's going to make this even more vibrant. So what's happening over here is supporting this vibrant activity right here. It's that simultaneous contrast where color next to each other, or if it's in the neighborhood. So this smoky shadow right here is in the neighborhood of our vibrant main peach there. And I'm just kind of dragging a little bit of that black Conte pastel pencil. I did it while I was waiting for class. I was looking at this. I put it in here too because we needed some smoky. I need to make sure that we're not missing some students that are trying to get on because it's done that before. Nope. Okay. A lot of folks out Christmas shopping. So this black kind of, it darkens a little bit, makes it a little smokier without killing it with straight black. So because we put that purpley brown down, so we still have some color in there. Now I'm going to come back to this peach here, but I want to get this developed too, partly because I can see this in my periphery. It's driving me crazy a little bit, so I want to get this developed. Okay, so I'm going to, just like we did our reflections on these other peaches, we're going to go in with some, I have to get pretty neutral and dark. I'm going to take my sienna, 203 of my new pastel here, and let's see how that's going to work in that reflection. And just where I see the peach, you don't want to drag this out because it's got to reflect this peach, so we've got to be a little bit more particular about these lines, these horizontal reflection lines. So what we're doing is we're drawing, it's not quite orangey enough. Let me see what happens when I put some of this in. Okay, so that's going to work fine. So I've got my sienna, but I'm going to have to also drag across that sienna with my 040 to get it a little. Oh, and you know what I see? This is interesting. I see the wood grain reflecting and extending from one peach into the other peach. That's pretty cool. We'll see how that works. I can kind of see an extension of this sienna and the wood grain through the two of them. And of course, the reason that we're not going to see quite as vibrant colors in our reflection of these peaches is because the wood grain is absorbing the light, the color. So you're going to have a darker image, which is almost always, I've never seen a reflection in water or glass that is the same intensity as the object that's being reflected. Now, I also see a little bit more. Oof, better turn the heat down here. I am seeing a little bit more. I'm looking for my dark purpley brown. I've got too many colors out. I've got another chunk of it in a different form here. So I see a little bit more the same color we've been using, that's the 353. Some of the wood grain kind of peeking through there. A lot going on in these shadows. And if you can keep a really fine point, it's better. But these are getting kind of dull. I could break it off and get some finer points, but if I keep turning it, get some darks right here on this peach too. You notice that in the reflection, you're going to see some of these this dark rim there on the reflection in this peach. Get that in. Make sure I'm still recording. Just putting in some of this dark brown here in the reflection. And I can see that there's more concentration of darkness here because it's reflecting this shadow up here. I'm going to just drag some of it over to the edge. Kind of starting to develop here. Then I see quite a big switch to brighter colors. Definitely not as bright as what we have up there. Just going to check something here. See if I've got enough dark purpley brown up here in this shadow. Might have to, don't want to, but I might have to add a little bit of black in there just to drop the value down a little bit, but we'll see. We still need to develop it. Okay, so now I'm going to, so I've picked up, this is a Rembrandt sienna, which is slightly brighter than my new pastel sienna. Seems slightly lighter. Oops. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, this is the Rembrandt sienna that came in everybody's set. And I'm going to start start turning my form, at least the reflection of my form, a little bit lighter sienna. I'll go ahead and go right over that dark passage there. And then I'm going to have to jump up to an orange. No, take that back. It's the deeper orange. In your Rembrandt set, you have a lighter orange and almost like a red orange. I know we have more broken color images to do, and I will probably, after watercolor, we're probably going to go back and do a few more broken color, do another session of broken color. I know I have a koi that I think it's going to be really beautiful, and another landscape images that I sent everybody. So after watercolor, as a break from watercolor, we'll probably go back, do a little bit more broken color. I know everybody was really enjoying it. Okay, so now this is a little bit too chromatic, and I want to settle that down kind of in a controlled way. So I'm going to pick up my brown. Is that the same one? Yeah. So I picked up a brown 001 in the pastel pencils, and I'm just going to do some wood grain lines with my brown. So it's serving two purposes here. It's giving me more of a wood grain look, and it's settling down that red orange that I just put down. And some of it up here. I still have that radiance, but yet this brown is settling it down a little bit. Coming back through with my brown and just covering any of the turquoise that I might see in the shadow with my brown. The turquoise is going to peek through no matter what, but I don't want it to jump out at this point. Okay. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and finish up our peach, our last peach. It's pretty glowy right now. We'll settle that down to this intense, vibrant area. And so even though it's pretty, I mean, I like the vibrancy of it, we wouldn't want it competing with our main center of interest. So, and technically, if you look at it in the reference picture, it is, it's definitely darker in value. So I'm going to I'm going to try this out, the 040 of the Conte Pastel pencil, and I'm going to hatch in over that vibrant yellow-orange. I also see a little bit of this red in here. It's kind of an orangey red. It's going to work well, I'm thinking. I'm going to turn the corner here, right there. Hatching, cross-hatching. It's bringing the value down a little bit, but not as much as I want. So I'm probably going to have to go in with something a little darker, more neutral. And I've got so many layers on there that it's kind of flaking off a little bit. That's better, but not dark enough. So I'm going to find and I thought I had a magenta. It's another Conte 039, and it's more of a magenta. Let's layer that on there. There we go. Now I'm kind of dragging some of that bright, so I need to clean it off every time, or do a few strokes and clean it. I'm picking up some of that bright yellow and dragging it back down into my shadow area. Don't really want to do that. Now this color is going to work well because I see, as my peach turns there, I see a little bit more magenta right here. That's going to work well right there. This is true broken color, what we're doing right here. So a little bit more there, and a little bit more down in here. I'll go ahead and overlap into my shadow. Actually dragging some of that shadow color up into my chroma area. Don't really want to do that. Now I do see, let's see if this is going to work. I see a little bit more intensity, color intensity back in here. This color's working pretty good for it, actually. That brown purple works well, but we need just a little bit more chroma brightness or intensity and color right in here. And I see a little bit more red right in here. So I've darkened this peach. It's just not showing up very well on Zoom there. But this peach here, just want to make sure it's darker than this peach. I come right down in here with this red. Just hatch over this glowy reflected light right in there. I'll come back in here too with the same red. It's working well. And I'm seeing some of these darks. I'm going to take some of my deep purple. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's our purple that we used in our color studies. And I'd rather use that than black in some of these areas right in here. Let's try that deep purple. Take my black pencil there and just kind of feather that out a little bit. Get those really dark values in there. Sometimes you have to use black, but if you can use a color, that's always better than using black. I'm going to put a little bit, and I kind of see it right in here. This is my deep purple. If I'm going to do that, then I need to add it to other darks in my painting. Just want to make my shadows a little bit more colorful. So I can do that with deep purples. Just a touch in some of my darkest shadows. And Zoom is definitely not picking that up, so it's looking kind of funny on Zoom. I'm going to put some over in this shadow here. Just want a little bit more color in my shadows. Put some down around my accent colors here. Yeah, some of those purples are jumping right out. So I need to kind of weave them into my painting. First, I'm going to take my magenta here, kind of weave that into that purple little bit right there. Sometimes we have to help these colors fit into the painting by weaving them in with other colors that we've used in our painting. I'm going to go back to my 353 and I'm going to hatch over that deep purple. That deep purple was helpful in darkening it. I need to settle the chroma down on that purple just a little bit. Hatch over that deep purple. So it added a little color in there. Let's see if I need to. But we needed to kind of blend it in a little bit. There's a dark rim right here on this peach, using my purpley brown here to help with that shape. A little bit of that deep purple right in there. Take my purpley brown, weave that in with hatches. I'm feeling this edge here is still a little too light. So I'm going to take my brown Conte. Let's have those two the same. They are. I want to darken this a little bit, so I've taken my brown 001, hatch over that. I don't want that jumping out visually. And I can see some sienna now right in here. Back to my purpley brown 353, settling some of these deep purples down just a little bit. Now I see a little bit of that turquoise right in here, and this side of it. Cover that up. Settle this reflected light down with my brown pastel. And I can also see now that I've Let that developed. I see a little bit of ochre. Our main peach here, I see a little bit of ochre. It's interesting as you're painting, kind of gets towards the end, it starts informing us of little tweaks we need to make. It might be too bright, that's okay. I'm going to get it started here. Got kind of a light rim there, and then it turns to a dark light edge there, turning to a dark edge. And it's a little bit too light, so I'm going to settle that down with my brown Conte pastel pencil. As it's darks over here in this shadow, add a little bit of purple to them to brighten them up a little bit. But I'm thinking we could just go a step darker. And I do this really carefully with a little bit of my black Rembrandt. I'm not going to put very much in there, but we need to darken it just one. I always try to darken with color first. So I've got a little bit of black in there, which creates a really dark neutral, which is good. Checking my other accent shadows. Seems like the accent shadows, as we work a painting, they tend to lighten up a little bit. I don't know if that's because particles tend to fall over them. Lighten them up. Okay, now I added a little bit of violet to the edge of this peach, my deep purple. I want to settle that down just a little bit with my brown purple here. Taking my brown purple and just kind of blending, weaving some of the darks. I see an abrupt color like purple. This brown purple works well and kind of settling it down in the shadows. I'm talking about shadow areas here. You can see that this shadow could come up a little bit more. Now I can make my wood grain a little bit more refined with my brown. I thought I had a darker brown. Are these the same? I have, it's kind of an odd one. It's a sepia Conte. It's 617, or you can take a brown, and we could refine this wood grain a little bit more in the reflection here. And there's a soft edge on these accent shadows too that we could use a brown pencil for. I know we could use black, but if we can use a color, that's better. Some of these wood grain areas, you can see these little kind of chevron shapes, and those are almost black. So I'm gonna It's interesting. See them right there. So I'm going to take my black and I'm going to create, see if you can see them. So like, I want to say like little arrow shapes. And what's interesting is this part of the reflection, you see no wood grain. And then you get up into these other reflections and you'll see the wood grain, which is really, it really supports your center of interest here because this reflection here is not affected by the wood grain. And since I used black in this part of the reflection in the wood grain, I'm going to look for other places that I can use it just a little bit. Don't want to go hog wild with that black Conte pencil. And I noticed that the reflection in this part of the peach, it's a little bit softer. So, and I've got some nice color there, and I'm going to go back to that sepia, which is the 617. Just going to soften that a little bit. Soften the wood grain a little bit. This has a pretty crisp edge here. Okay, now I'm going to go back into my center of interest. Just want to look at this peach back here. A little bit more red. This peach back here, there's some light pink. It's like the light, again, it's similar to what's happening over here. There's a light violet kind of pouring across that end of the peach. I don't know, my Conte set got a light violet at one point. I don't know where it went. Anyway, that's a light blue. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of it up in here, up in the corner. You can see just a little bit of this light hopping across the surface, just putting a little bit of it in. Tap that down a little bit. I'm going to take my pink, it's the lighter pink. It's the 038. Just hatch that down a little bit with my pink. Kind of pours across that form a little bit right there. Adds kind of a nice soft glowiness there. Those little nuances, boy, they make a huge difference. Just a little bit of that kind of up here along the rim, a little bit. Okay, let's see how we do in time-wise. See if we can spend a few more minutes on this. Okay, so we can, I know, at least on mine, this is pretty, I want to say chunky. Excuse me. I can take my orange, 028, and in this area I can do a little bit of soft hatching. Kind of hatch together some of these reds, except be careful because it's easy to pick up some of these dark colors and putting them into your light. Got to be a little bit careful with that. And then our form turns. It's turning away from the light, so I'm going to pick up my red orange here, do a little bit of hatching in there. In my deeper red, so as my form turns into the shadow, I'm progressively getting darker with my reds. As it's moving down. Now I do see some more of that, just this purple. It's very subtle. Definitely see it up here, and we already kind of did that up here, but I see a little bit more of it. It's balanced light, I'm sure of it. Up along this edge. Just going to deposit some of this purple, and then I'm going to go in with my pink, my 038. Just kind of hatch that purple down a little bit with some pink. You can do as much of this subtle hatching and blending as you want when it comes to broken color. Yeah, I just kind of pinked this edge up, which really helped it quite a bit. Then up here, there's a little bit darker, almost magenta. And this is 041. Right here, there's a little, almost a triangle of pink right in here. Back to my lighter pink, 038. Just going to soften this a little bit. One more thing. Let's see. This needs a little bit of orange right in here. Kind of melds into that pink a little bit. This is 012. Weave that into our red orange there. Okay, everybody. That's it for our broken color.